what it really speaks to is the necessity, the need of whiteness to preserve itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is how whiteness, and I'm not speaking of any individual, I'm speaking of the construct of whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks to the need of whiteness to preserve itself. Because how many white folks who are listening to this conversation and who actually have interest in making this world a better place, they want to be better human beings. They want this world to be better than what it is. But how many of them intentionally place themselves in environments where they will be the minority?
Right.
Welcome to the I'm All Over the Place podcast. This is Dara Star Tucker with my co-host,
Greg Bryant.
Welcome, Greg, and welcome to you all. Thank you all for joining us on the I'm All Over the Place podcast. We got a doozy of an episode for you today because I got worked up.
Yeah, you did.
I got worked up, and this is kind of a weird, like, insert an extra episode. We're not going to call it a bonus episode, but it's an unexpected episode, which then pushes this blackface episode that we've already taped. And then I keep promising it pushes it a little further down the road. But I think this is going to be a little bit more urgent today.
All right.
First of all, I want to tell you, I'm doing your job, Greg, because
all right.
We got to throw out the socials.
Yeah. If you're new, we welcome you, first of all. Secondly, Patreon is growing. We thank you, all of you who have come in as new members, supporting this great woman's work. Tell us where to find you on Patreon, first of all.
You can find me at Dara Star Tucker on most platforms, and Star has two R's. Dara with one R, Star with two. Dara Star Tucker on Patreon. On Instagram, it is Dara Tucker B. That's the only one that differs. TikTok is at Dara Star Tucker. YouTube.com/Dara Star Tucker. You can watch this podcast on YouTube if you'd rather see our lovely smiling faces. You can watch it on YouTube.com/Dara Star Tucker. Twitter is the same. Facebook is the same. So wherever you find me, we are happy to have you. We're happy to be here today. Not happy to be talking about the subject we're talking about today.
Oh, but you
first of all,
do you want
to do our little plug? We got a wardrobe plug. We're not sponsored. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Right. But our wardrobes are courtesy of One and Done Clothing Company.
One and Done Clothing.
Out of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Find them on Instagram.
Find them on Instagram at One and Done. We'll put the Indical at the bottom of the screen if you're watching via YouTube. But shouts out to them. Maybe we will get an endorsement from them.
Hey, that would be
see.
Nice.
Absolutely. And of course, our hats are, we won't say the name, but you know what we're wearing on our heads. Right on.
All right.
The Dilbert dilemma.
The Dilbert dilemma. I haven't decided. Is this the Dilbert dilemma or is it the downfall of Dilbert? The Dilbert downfall. Something.
Okay.
It's going to be some alliteration somewhere.
The Dilbert downfall. Better.
Yeah, I think this dude's been falling down for quite some time. But
he's got so much cushion that ain't going to hurt when he's at rock bottom. So.
I think the downfall is complete. I mean, the downfall that matters. I don't think in this society you can completely fall down anymore.
That's true.
There's just,
but when you choose,
there's always somebody there that's ready to just go, hey, we weren't done with that.
When you choose to wreck yourself and you have money, you're not wrecking yourself. You're just choosing to be secluded. That's all that is.
I mean, there's always going to be adherence. I've got folks in my comment section. In case you don't know who we're talking about Scott Adams, who is a cartoonist, has been around forever. I'm from the 90s. That's what I've started saying. I'm from the 90s. We are from the 90s. Mm-hmm. So if you were around at that time, then you're probably, you might be aware of a cartoon called Dilbert. It started off as a comic strip, and then it made it to television very briefly. I think in the late 90s or something, they made a television show out of it. Mostly, I think he's been known as a cartoonist that does comic strips. He's written books. He's been highly successful. Like, think of Charles Schulz with the Peanuts characters. He was kind of a more, modern day version of that. Scott Adams, he wrote the Dilbert comic strip. And this guy has been on what can best be described as a highway to hell for at least a good 15 years.
Yeah.
Has been, really making some intentionally controversial statements, has been aligning himself with some causes that are, I mean, it just,
Right. But in the manner of what can be loosely described as a bait and switch, Dara, tell these people explicitly who are new to your page, who someone shared this post to, what is your real feeling behind this type of gentleman and his platform?
I very accurately described how I felt about this guy. I said, he made some, what I described as virulent racist remarks. I mean, horribly racist remarks. And we will play that clip for you now.
Okay.
Just to kind of let you know what it is that we're referring to. We can get everybody caught up and so we can contextualize this whole conversation. I think, a few folks were ready to just freak out in my comments section when I did the little teaser video for this podcast. Like, oh, well, you're about to, I guess just the way that I framed it, it was like, hey, there's more to the story than what I thought. Because I'm not.
Oh, you're going to defend this guy?
Yeah, it's like I'm not deep into, Scott Adams lore. I knew that he was problematic. But I had no intention of trying to lay out some case for this dude not truly being the racist that he is. The surprising part to me was that the dude was not a straightforward conservative in the way that you would think by the comments that we are about to play for you.
Right. And that's what we'll talk about right after this.
Right.
Okay.
So if nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. All right, this can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population. Because unfortunately, there's a high correlation between the density. And this is according to Don Lemon, by the way. So here I'm just quoting Don Lemon when he notes that when he lived in a mostly black neighborhood, there were a bunch of problems that he didn't see in white neighborhoods. So even Don Lemon sees a big difference in your own quality of living based on where you live and who's there. So I think it makes no sense whatsoever as a white citizen of America to try to help black citizens anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's no longer a rational impulse. And so I'm gonna back off from being helpful to black America because it doesn't seem like it pays off. Like I've been doing it all my life, and the only outcome is I get called a racist. That's the only outcome. It makes no sense to help black Americans if you're white. It's over. Don't even think it's worth trying. Totally not trying. And there we go. You didn't expect that today, did you?
Nothing says I learned everything I know about black people by watching Fox News better than equating blackness with poverty and crime.
Yeah.
It's the telltale sign. If they start talking about black people and in the very next sentence they start quoting statistics about crime and poverty, that is a clear indicator that you ain't got no black friends. You don't know no black people. You might have a black friend at work who tolerates you.
I'll be even more explicit. This dude is a pimp and a thief, a saboteur, a provocateur. The truth is not in him because they're half-truths constructed to keep the influence and power that he has. Simple. And the scary thing is that he is not an isolated incident. That's why we're talking about this today.
Yeah, a lot of people got upset at the idea that, why are you giving this dude gas? Why are you giving him air? we just need to focus on the accomplishments of Black people. I had one woman roll up in my comments and say, and it's like, well, first of all, I do enough content around the accomplishments of Black people and celebrating Black excellence and Black joy and Black all of these things. So I don't receive that criticism. I really don't, because I put out plenty of content that is geared to just that. But that doesn't mean we don't need to talk about these kinds of issues head on. And it really isn't just about Scott Adams. And we'll get into the second part of this later. We're going to start out with Scott Adams and using his comments as a launching point to have a larger discussion, because that's the problem, is that people think discussing Scott Adams and what he said is just about him. No, it's much bigger than him. He is not an outlier. He is not just some rando dude that you just ignore and you go on and, talk about brotherhood. No, this is more common than not. It is more common than not. And so, yeah, this dude has been highly problematic for a long time. And I had a bunch of folks, well, you don't know what his history is. And he said this and he said that. I don't really care what all he said before these couple of interviews. And I watched another really long form interview that we will talk about too. But I've heard all I need to know about the dude.
Exactly.
I mean, I think I have a pretty accurate assessment of his crazy pants philosophies.
Yeah. And I think that for me, this puts light on something that I was made aware of in high school and in college. I may have said this on your show before, but I want to say it again. There are two distinct types of racism. One is a conservative racism. One is a liberal racism. This point is not anything that I necessarily arrived at on my own, but I've experienced both. Dick Gregory told a college professor of mine, he says, the conservative racism is, it doesn't matter if we happen to commingle some socially. What I have a problem with is you as a minority group doing better than me economically.
Right.
Having more economic mobility than me as a white person. Okay. The liberal racism, which we need to focus our attention on in this piece, is I don't mind. And as a matter of fact, I support affirmative action. I support laws that would help the trans community, the African American, the Black community, the Latino community, women, whatever, have equal rights, because that is right. But please, I don't want to be associated with you in a social context. I don't want to live in the same neighborhood as you live in. I really don't like it when our kids are in the same schools, even though I believe that they should be in the upper echelon of schools. And some of us have equated liberalism and progressivism with anti-racism, and that's not true.
Yeah, I kind of had some folks going off in my comments about, well, he's not a progressive, and he has been wildly inconsistent with his views. I mean, if you know anything about this dude, which I wouldn't even bother investigating him unless you just have nothing better to do. But he's along the lines of he puts me in the mind of like an Elon Musk when you kind of get just a general overview of his record and his history. He's liberal one day, he's conservative the next, he's libertarian, and then he says he's left of Bernie Sanders. He's all over the place. He really is. But when you pin him down on individual issues, it's like, yeah, he's pro affirmative action, he says, pro LGBTQ rights, even though he has made comics and a comic strip and statements that are at the very least mocking of the LGBTQ community, because I think he just sees himself as a bit of a, he's just kind of a trickster, got a trickster vibe about him. But there are a lot of individual issues where you can't necessarily label this dude as a conservative. Right. You really can't. He says he's kind of supposedly apolitical, but he's constantly trying to make comments and endorsing this one and that one. And then he says he doesn't vote, and he's maddeningly, I think there's the tendency when we, encounter old white guys. Let's just put it as bluntly as we possibly can. You encounter these older white guys. This dude's 65 years old and is at the end of a very long and lucrative career. Mm-hmm. You encounter these dudes, and there's the tendency to assume that there is some deeper intelligence there. Oh, this dude must be playing 4D chess. Oh, there's something real deep going on here. He must have a real plan behind the scenes. No, he's just firing off about this and that, completely detached from any real connectedness to the reality that most of us live in. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, it's very much Elon Musk vibes.
Right.
It's like he's the grand kind of puppeteer.
Right.
Just hoping to move people around, according to his whims. Mm-hmm. As you said, a provocateur, throwing rocks, hiding his hands, and not doing it very intelligently, not really doing this with very much strategy at all. But he's a rich old white guy, so we assume that there is some logic behind what he's doing.
There is a logic and there is a strategy, in my opinion. And then I promise I'll get back to my role on your show. But the racism of conservatism and the racism of liberalism points back to the same source: maintaining power and influence and separating the bourgeoisie from the proletariat. Mm-hmm. He's already got his money. Mm-hmm. What does he have to lose? Power and influence. Mm-hmm. He will protect that at all costs. That's why poor white people are just as in danger with someone like Elon Musk or this guy, because they don't want anybody to gain their power or influence away from them. It's like, you're threatening my power. Mm-hmm. And I will use any method, half-truths, lies, the truth, to box you out, using a basketball metaphor, of my power.
Yeah. Yeah, I think fundamentally this dude is pro-white guy, and whatever he has to do to make sure that white guys continue to be comfortable, he's going to do. And that type of behavior, I think, could be used to describe the methodologies of a whole lot of folks in power, or who are trying to attain power right now. That's big business. There's a whole lot of white guys and white folks who are really, really scared about the idea of losing power. And they're looking at the progressive white folks like, why are you all giving up ground? We need to not give up this ground. We got to fight to maintain this and hold on to this. It's a war in their mind, which is why this dude would make, I think, the completely incendiary statement that he did. I don't think it was totally disingenuous. I think he thinks of himself, as I said in the video, he thinks of himself as trolling. What I think the game that he's playing is that he is making intentionally hyperbolic statements, over-the-top statements, that in his mind embody the point of view of a more provincial white person. So in his mind, he's the smart white guy. It's like, I'm not the tobacco chewing kind of, baseball hat wearing, pickup truck driving, Confederate flag waving white guy who just doesn't know any better and who's reacting out of emotion. His whole thing is just is anti-woke. He hates the woke movement. So I think his intent is to show woke liberal people how they are alienating white people. That's a lot of what drives what he says and does. And he's one of these people where you can't even the vile things he says, you can't even necessarily interpret them as literally as you might if it were someone else. Because I think he just tends to be very disingenuous, which is the reason that there's so much inconsistency with what he says. When you are disingenuous, when you are not being truthful, then you are constantly being caught in essentially a web of lies, because there's nothing truthful about what you're saying. You're just saying whatever you need to for any given situation. Let me present myself however I need to manipulate this situation and to self-aggrandize to bring attention to myself so that I can remain in control. It's a very devilish tactic.
Yeah.
It's a very
evil.
devilish tactic, which is why I don't want to get too fixated on this guy. I said we would start out, kind of explain where I think this dude is coming from. He had this interview that I watched, this unnecessarily long 2-hour interview with this dude named Hotep Jesus, who in and of himself is extremely problematic. This is an extreme, he describes himself as an extreme left-wing, just radical Black nationalist who now has swung over to the right wing and somehow thinks that's better. So that dude's problematic in and of himself. And it was maddening because he really wouldn't just ask the pointed questions that any rational person would have asked in an interview like that. But it was just kind of funny that Scott Adams, he described himself as being in a 3-act play or something. He said, act 1 was that I'm going to just drop this bomb. Act 2 is that people are going to react and they're going to cancel me. So this is all thought out in his mind. People are going to react and they're going to cancel me and they're going to do this and that and they're going to write op-eds and blah, blah, blah. And then act 3 is what's happening right now. This is what I wanted. I wanted the conversation. I wanted to be able to sit down and just have a conversation, about what's really going on. And if anyone took my comments seriously about running away from Black people, then that's on you. And you're susceptible to the media cycle and this is their fault for taking what I said seriously. Utterly ridiculous. It's just gaslighting 101.
And a disregard for humanity and all in his wake to keep him where he is in his own mind, influential and powerful, and to grow that. Self-serving, as you say, the worst kind of evil.
Trickster.
Yeah, he's a little imp as far as I'm concerned. But I really appreciate you for going beyond, because there's a greater truth here. There's a greater point of examination and emphasis.
Yeah, and this is why I say, when people, a lot of folks had a reflex reaction, and it's understandable. I always say if black folks don't want to rehearse trauma, if Black folks don't want to allow these evil comments into their sphere at all, I am completely empathetic to that. I don't really have a problem with that. I think that white folks need to make themselves uncomfortable and sit with some of this stuff and not be so quick to assume that it is so far from anything that they would ever say or do, or this is just not my mentality and let's just ignore this and let's go on and look at more pleasant things. It's like, no, if a Black person is shielding themselves, it's because of trauma that we have endured. So I'm not asking a Black person to engage with this if they don't have the stomach for it. I barely have the stomach for it. But white America, for me, this is a different story. When things like this come along, I think it's so easy to disavow and just, I don't have, that is nothing to do with me in my world, my views. I'm, a liberal, I'm a progressive. That's not me.
Right.
And then you start to deeply think about, and this is the point that he made on that, in that interview with this African-American dude, the Black, the Hotep Jesus, whatever he calls himself. The point that Scott Adams was making in this interview was, he said, as many people as I had as were screaming and yelling at me on Twitter and, saying all kinds of crazy things to me, he said, not one of these people disagreed with what I said. That's what we need to zero in on. That is the bigger conversation, the larger conversation and the larger framework that is not being considered here. That it is so easy, particularly for, progressive white people, to rail, and all the comments that I saw, I almost started feeling sorry for the dude. It was they were tearing him limb from limb, and he intended this. It was intentional on his part. But just how easily white people can pile on because you are a horrible, virulent racist. How dare you? This is vile. These are evil, awful things that you said, and we don't want anything to do with you. You are exactly the thing that we eschew. We reject what you say, and they're proud of themselves in rejecting this message. Then you stop and think about the behavior that we have seen with white America since the days of Jim Crow. What is the actual behavior that we have witnessed? And is this dude, this virulent racist, that far off the mark when he says, but they didn't disagree with me? Is he that far off the mark? I would say no, not at all. We have and any black person, the first thing that a black person would probably think listening to those comments is, how vile, how vitriolic, how awful these comments are. This is so deeply insulting. This is offensive. It's awful. The next thought that most black folks would have is, isn't that what most of them think?
Yeah. Yeah. There's laws to prove it.
That's not a controversial statement.
It's not. Gerrymandering, redlining.
Hey, white flight, urban sprawl. That's what that is. That's exactly what he was describing.
We don't trust that black people want us, and we are more fearful or flighty around them because we have not made ourselves as white people. I'm not a white person. They have not made themselves comfortable enough to be able to entertain the idea of staying in an upwardly mobile black neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it really is a very deep thing, because it's, what it really speaks to is the necessity, the need of whiteness to preserve itself. That is how whiteness, and I'm not speaking of any individual, I'm speaking of the construct of whiteness. It speaks to the need of whiteness to preserve itself. Because how many white folks who are listening to this conversation and who actually have interest in making this world a better place, they want to be better human beings. They want this world to be better than what it is. But how many of them intentionally place themselves in environments where they will be the minority?
Right.
Where they will be surrounded, where their children will be going to school with black kids.
Maybe I'll even have a job with a minority majority, but I still get to go home to my lily white neighborhood with picket fence.
Yeah, how many of them would choose to live in a neighborhood that is mostly black, even if it were upwardly mobile? You have neighborhoods like Baldwin Hills in LA and many other neighborhoods in Atlanta and all kinds of places. White people don't go there. They don't live there.
Right.
They self-segregate.
Yeah.
Consistently self-segregate. And of course there is the tendency, there are tendencies within human behavior of all kinds of any group of people to want to gravitate to their quote unquote own. That partly is just human behavior. But this is something beyond that. And I think history bears that out.
Yeah. It's systemic because there were laws, and they still are laws that support it.
And, I've done videos and hope to do deeper videos on the history. And it's kind of funny that this dude, Scott Adams, zeroes in on the issue of education because he's, again, he's one of these people that describes himself as left of center. So he actually has interest in hey, how did we get here? He believes that systemic racism is a thing. That is not a concept that most conservatives would be willing to acknowledge.
Right.
That systemic racism exists.
Right.
The dude knows it.
Right.
Smart enough to know that.
Yes, but he stops it at education. And I've always been in favor of education, number one, and two, financial compensation.
He believes in affirmative action. He believes in reparations.
Yeah.
He's on the tip. That's the thing. When you actually grill this guy over what his actual beliefs are, he knows what the issues are and probably how they should be addressed. He understands that education is where a lot of these issues begin. And he even made the statement in that interview that he believed in reparations and that the way that he felt that reparations should happen is that we should really focus on the next generation. He said this generation, this problem cannot be solved with this generation. All of our effort needs to go into educating the next generation and creating a sense of equity.
Yeah.
For the next generation, and we will see. And how can you really argue with that? How can you argue with it, really?
But when you kick the can down the road, That is not a right now fix to a problem. That is still saying, oh, why we can't we just wait? Why can't we just, no. It's a twofold thing for me. I'm not speaking for anyone else. It's education and it is financial payout.
Yeah.
It's both. And if you think that Black people are unworthy or deemed unnecessary to investigate the value of a financial payment, that again is a systemic problem of supremacy. It's been done with other groups. We can do it.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that and.
Mm-hmm.
And these people don't want to give up their checkbooks. They don't want to give up their influence. They don't want to give up their power. And that's the end of the day. What's comfortable for them? It's comfortable for me to say education in 15 or 20 years is a safe solution for reparations. What does it hurt him? He doesn't have to make any sacrifice.
Well, I mean, it's easy to be critical of his position, but if you think about it, how many liberal white people are talking about reparations at all?
That's true.
How many presidential candidates even had that, other than Marianne Williamson, had that as a part of their platform?
Yeah.
It is a non-issue. It doesn't even make it to the table. So for somebody like him to speak about it, it's like, clearly the dude has enough sense to know better than half the crap that he's putting out there.
Yeah.
He's got sense enough to know that there's real harm and that's been done. There's real harm that's been done. Systemic racism is a real thing that needs real solutions. If you understand that, you got a certain level of responsibility that you are not living up to. Now you're just playing games.
Yeah. But he, as the smart guy, knows what the solution is. And that's my other inherent problem with liberal folks who are so in their own world and detached that they don't have enough faith or trust that Black people know what's best for them.
Yeah.
The best friend is the friend that says, hey, I am available to you. Tell me what you need.
You're speaking of allyship.
I'm allies, friendship. Yes. Tell me what you need. I don't have the right to tell you how to fix your problem. My responsibility is to work like the Dickens to get behind you when you tell me what it is that you want, because I believe that you are the answer to your problem.
Yeah, I mean, his whole comments about, I've tried to help Black people and I've been accused of being a racist. I mean, it just all came off as just completely disingenuous. Completely disingenuous. I don't think that this dude is actually looking for feasible ways or workable solutions in terms of combining his efforts with Black people to improve these solutions, not in any practical way. It's really just a talking down. I'm going to poke at this problem with a 10-foot pole and then say that I tried. And then describe the behavior that I have engaged in my entire life, which is fleeing from Black people. When were you ever not fleeing from Black people? Was there a point where he lived in a Black neighborhood and he was volunteering at after-school programs in minority underfunded schools or something? Where is all this help that he supposedly was providing? It was obviously completely disingenuous. And it was hyperbolic. It was over the top to try to prove some grander point and to try to embody the voice of a conservative white person who supposedly doesn't know any better. This is to scare the woke people. That's what all of that was about.
It's really interesting in the fight against, racism and structural racism, especially when you have been victimized by it. You're always on guard against the overt racism, but what is more tiring and what is more aggravating is liberal racism for me. I mean, I know to avoid the Ku Klux Klan, but I don't live in the South anymore. I live in a place that people claim that they are for me and people like me, while at the same time, clutching their purse on an elevator or, looking funky when I tell them where I live. It's this inherent superiority thing. Oh, well, that's good for you, but I would never. That's tiring on an emotional level if I allow it to be. But that's why I'm not confused when I hear this point of view. It's like, no, liberals are just as problematic as conservatives. That's why we don't owe anybody our allegiance blindly. So why would people assume in your comments that you were trying to defend this guy?
Probably because of the vagueness of the post, and I intentionally did not go in and just do the hot take on social media, because I think that's just a dangerous place to have conversations like this. It's just rife with presumption, with people watching 15 seconds of a video and commenting, which is what they did anyway. It's like in the vacuum of information, they just sort of inserted, whatever they felt like I was getting ready to try to be fixing to, maybe say. And I did say, hey, this is not as it appears to be. There's, this guy calls himself a progressive. There's more to the story than this. For a lot of people, that was their cue to assume, I'm going to tell you that this dude's not really racist. No, I'm not going to tell you that Scott Adams is not really racist. Scott Adams is a horrible racist. He probably doesn't think he is, like a whole lot of folks don't think they are. But this is the issue that we're dealing with the dude who's, he whose name must not be spoken. I refer to him as, it's this whole, we do basically line up with what he's saying, but he just, he has the guts to say the stuff that the average person just won't say. And that's, he's taking his cues from that dude, like a whole lot of folks are these days. They're taking their cues from what was begun in 2015,
the
really,
door's open,
which is when he really got going, like full on, and started becoming quite unhinged. So he's a, not to say that he suddenly developed these horrible views at that time, but now it's just it's open season.
Yeah. Is there one type of racism that's more exhaustive for you?
No, I mean, it's 2023. We don't really deal with cross burnings and,
it's still there.
I mean, I haven't seen any cross burnings.
We don't live in that area anymore.
There was a cross burning at a house down the street from our house, at a house that we lived at in my childhood. I'm not saying I don't know that this stuff can happen, but that is not the world in which most of us live. You can't say that we live in a world where we're constantly worried about being lynched or, we definitely deal with police brutality.
Maybe by the police.
Yeah, we deal with police brutality.
That's the new form of it.
But, we don't see black bodies, as Billy said, hanging from trees and all of this stuff. This is a more genteel, kind of
the
world
facade of genteel
where that's concerned. I mean, I have my views on all of this stuff. I'm not one of these folks that just complains that things haven't changed, because I feel like, especially with as much research, investigation that I have done around things like the Red Summer and the New Negroes and the, Jim Crow laws and all this stuff. You can't study our history like that and then get up and say 100 years later, nothing's changed. No, things have changed.
Yes.
Things haven't changed as much as they need to change.
Right. And it's different.
Yeah, things haven't changed as much as some folks want to claim that they have changed. But of course things have changed. Of course we do not have the right to say we are enduring what our ancestors did. We should not be enduring what our ancestors did. We should not be enduring anything near what our ancestors did.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean that things have not shifted. Of course, we can acknowledge that things have shifted. So no, I don't deal with overt, in-your-face racism. It's just one of those subtle, insidious things in general, I think for most Black folks, where you can never really put your finger on it. You can never really say, this is what it is. This is what I feel like is impacting this interaction. This is why I feel like I didn't get this job. This is why I feel like this person was funky with me. This is why I feel like I was followed around in the store. This is why I feel like I was stopped, and on and on and on and on. And white people have no clue of the world that a lot of Black folks live in, where it's just this oppressive kind of low cloud of like, it's there, but it's just in the air and you can't quite describe it. And no one will really, if they're not experiencing that, they don't have any way of knowing what you're dealing with. And it's hard to convince them that it even exists.
Yeah.
But I think there are more non-Black people in the world who are willing to accept that this thing is a reality, that racism in 2023 is a reality, than there have ever been before.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly post George Floyd. And of course, we've progressed as a society. There are more true allies, some would say accomplices, than there have ever been before. Would I have been able to do the kind of work that I do online even 10 years ago? I probably would have been looked at like I was half crazy. A lot of people do look at what I do as just like, what's wrong with you? Why are you talking about these things all the time? Mm-hmm. But today, there is so much more of a hunger for this kind of knowledge and information. People are hungry to understand what these issues really are and to do the work of anti-racism that is necessary in order to set some things right. More so than ever before. And I say that as someone who is on the online front line of these discussions that are being had on a consistent basis. I cannot say we are living in the world that our parents lived in. No, we are not. Our parents couldn't have there was no internet back then, but our parents couldn't have done daily consistent or weekly consistent anti-racism work, and it could have expected to have, as I do. I have to acknowledge, I have a following of almost 1 million people online. Most of those people are not Black. Statistically, most of those people are not Black. So I've got to acknowledge there are non-Black people out there who are willing to do the work and who are waiting for information. It's kind of funny that some of them were in my comments today defending me. That was a really unusual thing to see. I had one, it was kind of a weird thing that has not really happened. I haven't had this much pushback from Black folks on a post that I've done probably since the post about Black and Jewish relations. Right. Because of what people assumed that I was getting ready to say in this podcast. And I had one Black woman who said, oh, you know what? I usually love your stuff, but who cares about this? Who cares? This is just some random racist. And you're out there, even though I said in the video, this is not about chasing racists and playing whack-a-mole with racists. This needs to be contextualized on a much deeper level and on a societal level. And she got upset and was just, yammering about how you just need to be lifting up Black people and talking about all the accomplishments we're doing and putting out love. And there was a white dude. He said, I'm a 62-year-old white guy. And yes, she does need to talk about this. We trust what she's talking about. I mean, this dude just went in. Yeah. We trust what she's talking about. Yeah. She has been a consistent voice. I have followed her for a year and a half. She has taught me so much about this. White people need to hear this. That's what he said. Yeah. Could I have expected feedback like that, interactions like that, even 5 or 6, 7 years ago? Pre-George Floyd is really what we're talking about. Yeah.
3 years ago, 4 years ago. Maybe not.
I don't think so.
Maybe not.
I don't think so.
Which is scary and frightening on a different type of level. And it's always okay to say, you know what? Me as a Black person, maybe I don't have the grace or the discipline to be in this field. Yeah. Maybe you have been given a grace and a perception and a fearlessness to be able to deal with Black and white folks on a way that brings these issues of racism and supremacy to the fore as an individual voice. All Black people should not be expected to have to teach white folks. Exactly. I'm sorry. Exactly. That's not what we're talking about. But for those that do, thank you. And we need a platform. You need a platform to be able to debunk, to be able to examine, to be able to think critically. That's one thing that I would say to anyone in your comments. Please understand, whether you agree or disagree is your freedom. But Dara Star Tucker is a critical thinker. And I encourage white and Black, whatever your ethnicity or race identity is, critical thinking. That would save us from a lot of doo-doo that we're in right now, because we rush to judge out of emotion, and we obviously have trust barriers. But if we can evaluate and think critically, And we can then say, you know what, that's not for me, but I don't discriminate that person for being able to share on their platform what they need to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen comments like that, and under this video and many others where people, you have to get used to the fact that people are going to disagree sometimes with just the fact of you covering a topic that you're covering. I've had people criticize me for not talking about black stuff. I did a video about a white dude. I thought this page was about race. Like, okay, dude, if this ain't your particular cup of tea, just keep scrolling. We'll get back to what you was wanting to see, fairly soon.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of folks come along and say, I don't necessarily agree with your take on this. But there have been other folks, but I appreciate you for even trying to address this. There have been other folks that have said, particularly under this video, like, hey, I don't know if I even really want to talk about this dude, but I trust you and your content. I trust the fact that you will always find the deeper story. You're going to contextualize this for us. This is not just some yin yang that is being thrown out there. And I follow a few of those pages that kind of, just the races of the day type thing, not literally, but I follow a couple of accounts that really exist just to, point out the latest Karen or Ken, I guess is the male counterpart of a Karen, who are just doing, just horrible, awful, just vile, racist things. And one account in particular that exists to basically locate these people, figure out who they are, figure out who their employers are, and they're just being terrible people. And like, hey, at the very least, we're going to make it tough for you to continue in your particular line of employment because of something terrible that you did. There's a place for that. There's a place for that type of content. That ain't what I do, though. So the people who know me, hopefully, and have followed me for a while, they can hang on and stick with it and understand that my job, I feel, is to contextualize these societal phenomenons or these societal occurrences and realities that we deal with that maybe seem like they just sprung up out of the air, sprung up out of the earth.
But they don't. They have deep
But they
roots.
didn't. Yes, there's always a deeper reason why these things are happening. There's always some angle that you're not looking at, especially when race is involved. And I'll get in and start to do a video on something that I think is of interest. If race is involved, it is always, always, always going to be deeper than what I expect it to be. I think I'm going to tell a 60-second or 90-second, 2-minute story, and I end up with 6 minutes because you just pull at the string and it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah,
which is what I love. I mean, that's what I'm passionate about. Critical thinking, as you said, and media literacy. Understanding, when I looked at a video like this, my first instinct was to react, which I said in the teaser. I wanted to do a response video. It's like, man, this has been gnawing at me all day. There's something weird about how dispassionate this dude is. There's something weirdly not sincere about what this dude is saying. He doesn't really believe this, but he feels like he has the right to say it. There's something really manipulative about what this guy is doing. Media literacy, stop and think. Don't just fire off. And then that thing kicked in with me because I was getting ready to do a video. And I said, okay, let me do a little bit of research. I'd heard that this dude was just, said some problematic things, never anything that I'd investigated. And of course, the minute you start to dig a little bit deeper, here we go.
Yeah.
There's more to it.
Yeah.
It's white privilege gone to seed. And I don't really like throwing out the term white privilege like that so freely, but that's really what it is. It's like this super detached, rich, 65-year-old, cis, hetero, white man gets to make these, what he probably thinks of as almost playful statements, embodying maybe the worst of the worst sentiments of what the white people that he looks down upon.
Yeah.
He's playing this weird game,
it's Archie Bunker
but it's
gone
a privileged game.
Yeah.
It's a privileged game. You as an older white dude get to say these awful things because you want to supposedly start a conversation. This is what he said. He wanted to start a conversation. And you got more money than you know what to do with. I'm sure the dude is well taken care of. He didn't blow up Dilbert, as he said, without a plan. He's got a plan for self-preservation. Whether his plan for how he's going to start a conversation in the general culture is no, it's not going to work. Whatever he thought he was doing is not going to work. But it's privilege. It's totally privilege. Just the kind of ridiculousness that Elon Musk engages in. And it's irresponsible. It's deeply, deeply irresponsible.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having the courage to be able to, again, bring these issues to us all and to get beyond the keyboard warriors and actually be descript in your dealings and your thinking.
It's hard to do these days. You know, people want the hot take. And they got it. They was upset, riled up in the comments because I wasn't going to give them the hot take. And then they made a hot take and argued with that.
Well, I feel like you were responsible with your platform, and hopefully there will be more who will come in and fellowship with you and not try to second guess your position and your platform, because you've all got the receipts and you've got evidence for days of where your allegiance lies for truth and honesty, and certainly in support of Black people and folks who want to do right. Tell them again where they can find you on the socials.
You can find me at Dara Star Tucker, Dara with 1 R, Star with 2, pretty much everywhere other than Instagram. We are really trying to get this issue fixed. We talked to our label, record label today. We are putting out an album later this year, by the way.
Yes.
We talked to our record label today, and we're trying to kind of see if that maybe they could have a conversation with Instagram about getting my Instagram switched over to Dara Star Tucker. So we'll see. But right now it's Dara Tucker B.
That's it.
I've got Spotify. Y'all can go find me at Dara Tucker. There's no star on Spotify, but Apple Music, Spotify, under music, I'm just Dara Tucker. And Patreon, patreon.com/Dara Star Tucker. I'm so thrilled at how the Patreon is moving.
Yeah, me too.
It's just really cool when I see you guys come through. I will add a little note about the Patreon. I appreciate when y'all come in and, you know, want to throw $20, $25 a month. That warms my heart. But you know what? Some of y'all $25 people, y'all fall off.
Oh, man.
Y'all fall off after 2-3 months. And I understand it. You see that $20, $25 hitting your bank account every month. It makes you, you feel it. You see what I'm saying? You feel that $20 or $25. You're not really going to feel 5 or 10. Most of my 5 or 10 people have stuck around.
Yeah.
So I would almost advise, just slide in, just just ease in. If you want to up your pledge later, that's great. But I appreciate the love. If you really are just trying to support, I will not turn you down.
Right.
But, don't feel like you have to make a huge pledge every month. Patreon is the place, of course, where people support you with a, monthly donation every month, help you keep making your content. And I give them special little behind the scenes. They have a breakdown on Patreon that nobody else saw.
That's true.
A failed breakdown. It was a completely edited, put together breakdown where Dara Star Tucker was doing too much. If you want to see Dara Star Tucker do too much, head over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Dara Star Tucker, and you're gonna see the doing too much breakdown. I had to break it up, and I'm re-editing it into 2 separate breakdowns.
There you go.
Because there was just too much information.
Yeah, it's good information.
Too much.
Good information.
But I'm actually excited about those. Those will be coming soon.
Good deal.
And I've got so many ideas for so many new breakdowns that are on the way.
Right on. And we're getting on the road this summer as well. We'll be releasing those dates probably next month. The first few dates will be released. We'd love for you all to come out and see Dara do her original calling, which is vocalist and songwriter. Yeah,
if you see my music come through your feed, you do your best, because TikTok will not, they will suppress that stuff like crazy. They will suppress the crap out of my music. Instagram is not as bad, but TikTok, you will not see my music unless you really go and intentionally look. So go to my page, go to my TikTok page, go and like some music stuff, comment on it, repost it, whatever, to promote the music a little bit more. It's just kind of become a weird thing to share music over there if it's just going to, hit like a lead balloon. But I want you guys to hear this music. I'm so excited about this album coming up. This is like half my music, half cover songs. I will be talking about it more in the future. So follow me on Spotify. Let's get these numbers up. And I'm looking forward to sharing that project with you guys really soon.
Right on.
Come let me love you. Let me give my life to you. Let me drown in your laughter. Let me die in your arms. Let me lay down beside you. Let me always be near you. Ooh, come let me love you. Come love me again.
So on this episode of Finding Your Voice, I want to talk about envy. I am actually doing a 2-week workshop, and this is a grant-funded thing that is being done by a wonderful jazz singer named Dee Dee Bridgewater. If you're not a huge jazz fan, you may not know that name, but she is a legendary singer in the jazz community. And she has started a fellowship where she basically corrals maybe 10 to 12 singers every year and pulls them together. Right now, it's still virtual. And we do everything from yoga to meditation to discussing our dreams and goals. Then they pull in specialists from management, agents, and booking people, and all kinds of folks that have conversations with us about our careers. It's not really an artistic development kind of thing. It's all about professional development. It is a 2-week professional development workshop, essentially. So it's a really cool experience. I'm just right at the beginning of it. And what we talked about today, one of the things we talked about today, and Dee Dee was so generous with us with her time and her experiences, but she talked about having jealousy as a performer and the effect that that had had on her. And there was a particular singer that she was super fixated on back in the 90s when she was still kind of fighting for that place. She hadn't quite hit that legendary status yet. And she started to feel that this singer had really had an impact on not only her career, but the careers of several other people at that time, and that all the attention was focused on this person, and suddenly it just created this vacuum where there really wasn't enough airtime, there really weren't enough resources for her and these other singers, and that something, she felt really deeply that something had been taken away from her. And she talked about how this had consumed her life and her mind and her energy for years. She was just overly fixated on this person. And unfortunately, with a group of singers and professionals, we all have our deep insecurities. That's one thing you will learn if you're around singers or performers, creative people in any way. If you are a creative person, then you know we tend to be some of the most insecure people out there, because this world, this creative world, provides no security. We have no employer. We have no guarantee that there will ever be work for us in the future. You know, you can kind of get into that grasping place unintentionally. You know, you don't mean to be that person, but you find yourself looking around going, why don't I have the things that I'm supposed to have? And why does this person have it? And why did they get this opportunity? And why wasn't I elevated and promoted? And I when Dee Dee started telling the story, I jumped in and I asked a question. I was like, well, she said she started to move past this place after about 3 years, and she realized how much it had consumed her and how foolish it was to have allowed this thing to consume her this long. And I jumped in after that and I said, well, how did you move past this? How did you move past this place of envy of someone else? And she said, what I really had to do, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here, she said, I had to engage in radical self-love. I had to allow myself to say, you know what, Dee Dee, you are great at what you do. I had to allow myself to be loved by me. And it sounds kind of corny and it sounds a little bit trite, but this is something we don't really engage in much, at least in the space of being creative people, because we're constantly challenging ourselves. We're constantly questioning ourselves. And again, making those comparisons to other people. But if we can stop and block out those distractions and realize that our job is not to outperform anyone else. Our job is to realize that there is absolutely no one that has what we have. There is no one who can do what you do the way that you do it. No one else can be Dara Star Tucker. And I may not think that that is just the most wonderful, thrilling thing to be all the time, but it is absolutely guaranteed that no one is going to be that any better than I can be. And until you really internalize that knowledge and the truth of that, you will constantly be questioning yourself. You will constantly be comparing yourself to other people. And as the old saying goes, comparison is the thief of joy. There is no better way to take the joy out of the pursuit of something that you love than to constantly find yourself in a place of comparing yourself to other people. So I just wanted to pass along Dee Dee's advice to you all today. Don't be afraid to show yourself radical love. You are worthy of that. You are worth it. And it is the only way that you are going to be satisfied and contented with your life. Your job is not to be better than anyone else. Your job is to be the absolute best version of yourself that you can possibly be. I know you've heard it before, but it's worth hearing again. Thank you so much for joining me on I'm All Over the Place. I'm Dara Star Tucker, Dara with one R, Star with two, and I am looking forward to seeing you next time.